And also for the record, like, I don't plan to edit out parts of the conversation, so like, I want it to be like the entire thing.
Okay.
Oh, something really bad. You say something really bad. Oh crap! I got Robin.
I'll be good. I know how to be good.
All right. Good. 3, 2, 1, and we go. Good afternoon, Robin.
Good afternoon, Rex.
Right.
How are you?
Thank you. Welcome to the show, Chasing Excellence. All right, so pretty much we're going to be discussing like the least controversial topic in the world, which is Roe V Wade and abortion.
Okay, yeah. Nobody has strong feelings on that.
No, not at all. Yeah, and so pretty much like, so a little bit of background about you and I. We're good friends, and yet with opposing views on a lot of different things. Yet we're able to have a civil discussion about it for the most part. So I just want to open up. So today we're just going to be discussing like the hot news of this month. Next month it'll be a new topic to shock the entire United States.
Let's hope.
Yes. So it's going to be about Roe V Wade, the abortion, and the history of it. So for the record, I am pro-life. I believe that life begins the second the sperm hits the egg. From there a brand new strand of DNA that is woven. And from that point onwards, it is going to grow. It is an actual life, and it has a right to life. So that is like my overall stance. Like there's obviously a lot more nuance to my topic, but that's like a quick overview.
Okay.
Can you state yours?
I could not disagree more.
And it goes.
I am totally pro-choice. I think that until a fetus is viable, it is not a life, it is a part of the mother, and so therefore the mother should be completely in charge of the decisions of what she does with her body. And I don't think that anybody else should have any say in what she does with her body.
Okay. All right, that's the end of the podcast.
Okay.
No. So like.
Thank you for seeing my side.
All right. All right. So I think like that's always like the crux of the disagreement between the two sides, which is at what point is it considered viable? Like, is it the first trimester, second, third trimester? Is it the second it's born? Like, what point is it considered a human life? And what I've actually discovered, because I've been listening to a lot of content, reading a lot of articles about this just in preparation for this conversation, is that whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, there still isn't an agreed upon moment of when the viability actually exists, because there's actually people who are on the pro-life side who say that viability begins in the second trimester, and some people actually on the pro-choice side who says that a viability begins either at the day the baby is born or in the third or second to third trimester. So like it's we still as a nation haven't culturally agreed upon when viability begins. So I've stated where I believe.
Right.
How about you?
I think that once the fetus is capable of surviving outside the womb, which is somewhere in the second trimester. I think that, and I haven't done the research on this, and perhaps you have, I think that around 20 weeks is about as early as any fetus has ever survived outside the womb. So, at that point when it could survive outside the womb, then at that point I don't really think that that it should be. However, again, I think that we're placing our morality into this argument where it does not belong. Because what we believe from a religious, moral standpoint really doesn't have any point in this argument, because we're supposed to have separation of church and state in our country.
100%.
And so I think that would be a question for medical personnel to decide at what point that is viable. And then we as a nation need to decide if that's what we want to call the point when we no longer, when we treat that as a person at that point, and then they fall under the 14th Amendment with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Until they are capable of living outside the womb, I don't think that they have any right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think it's important to note that being pro-choice does not mean that you're pro-abortion.
Yes.
It just means that you're pro giving people a choice, and that I am pro allowing people to make decisions and not imposing my morality on other people. Because, that's, me, I have some pretty weird moralities.
You don't say. You?
But what I mean by that is that, a lot of people think that if you're pro-choice, that you're all about, that everybody should be able to have an abortion every time, all the time, anytime they want, and that, and I just don't think that's my decision to make.
And actually, I think there's actually an agreement with the pro-life side and the pro-choice side over there, because on the pro-life side, believe it or not, it's not that the pro-lifers, at least the ones that I've spoken with and ones that I'm familiar with, they're not saying make abortion completely illegal the entire time. They're actually on the same train as you about giving people more choices. They actually would rather an abortion. They view abortion as a tool to be used in specific circumstances, like in terms of rape or incest, which is like the most common,
right?
Example that's brought up of should this baby be allowed to live during, if it was conceived through rape / and or incest, which is a whole horrific topic on its own. But at that point, what pro-lifers want is for that to be the absolute last resort. They want most people who are considering an abortion to know, hey, before you actually go through with this medical procedure, you can actually have your baby be born, and if you can't take care of it for whatever reason here, you can still give it away for adoption and let a family who's able to take care of it, right? Or like that's just one choice. Or like there's also a lot of like help programs, like either through the government or through nonprofit foundations that do offer like support networks for young teenage pregnancies or like people who are just in struggling scenarios. So they want people to know that, hey, like abortion isn't the only choice.
Well, already in, I think, every state in the country, every state that I'm familiar with, there is a required counseling and a 24-hour period before the procedure actually takes place after that counseling. So women are already getting that. That's already part of what's going on, and anybody who's responsibly doing this procedure is going to present the options as well. Again, people, it's not that they want to abort babies. It's just that they want to allow women the option. And the problem is not just the woman who got raped or the woman who was abused or violated in some way by a family member. It's sometimes the mother who is undereducated, underemployed, already has 3 children, and the condom broke. Or the birth control pill that's 90 some odd % effective.
92.
So the other 8% kicked in. Things happen, and sometimes it just isn't practical. Obviously, there's the life of the mother being at stake. I think most people are open to that. However, the Texas law and the Mississippi law don't take those things into account. They have completely abandoned abortions once a heartbeat is detected.
Once it hits 16 or 18 weeks.
No. Once it's 6 weeks.
Okay.
That's about the time, and actually that's not written in stone. That's not a date that they can say 6 weeks today from the day that you conceived is going to be when the heartbeat. It's a fluid thing, and once that heartbeat is detected, under no circumstances can that be done? And the problem that they're running into in Texas right now is that you've got this 24-hour waiting period. They can't even truly detect the pregnancy until somewhere 4 or 5 weeks, which gives them a very, very short window when they can still do anything about it. And it's causing women to have to make that decision right now. Whereas under normal circumstances, even if you said first trimester, first 13 weeks, there's still a good period of time for women to make that informed decision, to take that time to sit with their feelings, to figure out, is there a way for me to avoid this? Is there a way for me to make this work for me? Because when you are pregnant, and this is something you'll never know.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. When you're pregnant, your hormones are going crazy. There's all kinds of things going on. Decision making is not your strong suit at that moment. And so making these decisions is not an easy thing to do. No. We are biologically driven to want to protect this fetus. So making those rational decisions is a difficult thing to do. And it's a difficult thing to do, I think, for any rational person. Now, I acknowledge that there are wackadoos out there on both sides and everywhere that maybe use this as a birth control. And I know those people exist, and okay, we're going to put those people aside. The majority of the people, I think, that go through this, it is an agonizing decision, and it's an agonizing procedure to have done, because you know what you're doing, and you understand that if you continued on in this, then there would be a family and a parentage and all of that eventually that would come from this. So it's, and either way you go, it's changing your life. But when you go through a pregnancy, the hormonal things, the emotional things, the physical things that happen to every person is remarkable. And you will never be able to experience that. And it's a very, the concept, the idea that, oh, you could just give it up for adoption, that is a flip argument that really makes me angry. Because I know women who've done that.
It's
and who spend the rest of their lives walking down the street looking in the face of every person that is the age that her child would have been and wonder, you know, is that one mine? You know, it is a heartbreaking, devastating decision to make. And you don't know. And there are plenty of instances of children, and you know, you and I have talked a lot about race and different things. You know, a child that looks like me that goes into the adoption system is probably going to come out okay. Child that looks like you that goes into the adoption system may not come out so good. Because it just is what it is. And you don't know what's going to happen. There are tons of children who wind up lost in the foster system, who wind up in bad situations. I know that our adoption professionals and our children and family service professionals do the very best job that they can to try to make sure that there aren't issues. But they're not perfect.
Things happen.
Things happen. And if something happened to my son, and it would be devastating to me, but at least I would know that I was involved when he was younger, I should say that. At least I would know that I was involved in the decisions that put him in whatever situation that he was in, and that I was there to protect him as best I could. You don't have that if you put a child up for adoption. And it doesn't lessen the emotional things that you feel for having done that.
No, I agree with pretty much everything you said, and there's one thing that I do want to discuss upon, because I think the second part of my stance on this whole abortion situation is the effects that the effects that Roe v. Wade has had on society is something that causes a lot of concern for me, because the whole purpose of Roe v. Wade in 1972 was just to make abortion a constitutionally protected right, federally. Something that's and this is just one of those unintended consequences of whenever you enact some legislature that large, and the studies have shown that a majority of the people who are performing abortions are actually just people who are in well-off areas. They're not like super rich, but they're like they're like white picket fence neighborhood. They're doing okay with themselves. They're usually like anywhere from like teenagers to like mid 20-year-olds who are not the victims of rape, who are not the victims of incest. They're just people who are being promiscuous, and they view abortion as, hey, this is just another form of a condom. This is just another form of the pill. It's just another contraception, and that's how they use it. It's not that they're trying to prevent a tough life for the kid. When raising a kid, it's not easy. I don't have to tell you that. Mm-hmm. So they're using it as a form of contraception, and it's not that they're coming from a bad situation. They've got a great situation in which to raise a kid, maybe not when you're 16, or maybe not even when you're 21, because you're still trying to get your life together. So the other side of my perspective is just that it kind of absolves responsibility from the act of having sex, because pleasure principle aside, sex is about procreation, creating another human life, creating a bond with another human being. And when you take away like the most the most impactful part of having sex, it kind of absolves a lot of the responsibility of doing such acts, which then compound to other parts of the life cycle. All right, cool, I can have sex, I can get a kid, get pregnant, and I can act away the baby. Well, what else can I absolve myself responsibility from? And that's something that is a huge concern to me. And the studies, the numbers have shown that from 1972 to now, like middle to upper class abortions from young females has gone up substantially.
Okay, yes. However, I think that the difference in our world from 1972 till now and is drastic. Mm-hmm.
70s weren't exactly a very non-promiscuous time.
The 70s were not a non-promiscuous time, but there was still a lot of stigma around. Even when I graduated high school in 1980, mm-hmm. There was still a big stigma around, being a virgin. Mm-hmm. By the time my son came around, who is your contemporary, there was a kid in his 8th grade class that was pregnant and still going to school. I mean, things had changed. In my day, that never would have happened. In my day, and I hate to say that because it makes me sound like I'm ancient, but...
You're 21, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. With many years' experience. But when I was in high school, that just simply wouldn't have happened. If somebody got pregnant, they were taken out of school. They were taken someplace else. They did not stay in school pregnant. That just simply did not happen. Especially not in Riverview. Move the
microphone like a little away from your hair. Yeah, or that works too. All right.
Plus, it gives me the chance to do the hair flip.
Mm. I'm gonna see if I can slow that down. All right. So I think that we have to look at the time and the culture. You've got kids, and kids are there. You can't say that kids are not going on the internet and being able to see stuff that certainly
probably neither you nor I saw as children.
Oh, when I was 13, I had to go out of my way to find porn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now it's in their bedroom. It's on their smartphones. So we can't put our head in the sand and live in a world where we're preaching abstinence and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And you talking about people using abortion as a term of birth control, I know that there is a percentage. I also know that it's a relatively small percentage of women that are actually doing that. I would guess, because I know that I read one study out of Texas recently that said that 40% of the, at this particular clinic, which was in a rural Houston area, said that 40% of the abortions that they were performing were married women who had children. So that only leaves 60%, and I can't imagine that more than half of those are people using it that way. So you're talking a reasonably small percentage, less than a third, that are potentially using abortion as a method of birth control. Thanks to the STDs and the rest of the crap that the younger generations are having to deal with out there. The use of condoms is a lot more prevalent than it was 30, 40 years ago. So that is something that these people do have, that most of them are using. They again are not 100%, so you've got issues that come up there. But I don't think that that's a valid argument for why you should limit a woman's right to abortion. And the thing that you find, and the thing that they're finding in other countries where in the relatively modern era abortion became illegal, is that the number of procedures isn't really going down. They're still happening. It's just that it's not happening legally, so it's not happening safely. And so you're risking a lot more women's lives, because we're still going to have sex. And saying that sex is a function of procreation is laughable. I don't even think you believe that. I really don't. I don't even think you believe that.
I would never have sex except to have a kid. No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, I understand that there are a lot of people out there that do believe that, and that's fine that they believe that, and I can 100% defend their right to believe that. But that's a belief. That doesn't belong in our laws. That is a moral judgment, that is a belief judgment, and that does not belong in our laws. So that doesn't have a place in this argument, in my opinion.
All right, so I am not religious, but I'm still pro-life.
You're not religious, but you are a very moral person, and you are a very spiritual person, and you have your own set of beliefs and morality that doesn't have to be religion. Separation of church and state, we can get into the definition of church, but in my opinion, that's any belief system that you would have, as opposed to strict fact and what is social convention.
All right. No, so far I haven't really heard anything that I really disagree with, actually. I think we agree more than the only part that we disagreed upon so far throughout this entire discussion, as far as I can tell, is just the definition of when the fetus becomes viable.
Right. Other
than that, I think we're on the exact same page, because I don't want to control people's lives either. I'm very against telling other people what to do, especially in this case. The part that I don't like. Again, I want people to have choices. I want people to I don't want to make abortion illegal, as pro-life as I am, because I view abortion as a tool to be used intelligently. And I think that one thing that, again, this leads back to my responsibility perspective of just, like you said, people are gonna have sex. Kids are gonna have sex. You got porn. I can find porn in less than a second on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, like your son, when he was 19 years old, Lord knows what he was doing in college. You know, on a lonely Friday night. You know, I'm not gonna put that thought into your head. Anyways, you know, so like, I've taken sex education, and it taught me just taught me like, hey, when you have sex, this is what happens with life, but. And they teach me like, hey, and they teach me like, you know, like you should wear a condom, but I just didn't feel like as a kid, because I took sex ed when I was 13, like it didn't really hammer home to me, just like, hey, like there's a lot more to having sex than just having kids, you know, like there's emotional things that happen as well. People like friends typically can't have sex without things getting complicated. You know, there's like physical touch does all kinds of things between two humans, and then if you happen to have a kid, the average cost of raising a kid from 0 to 18 is about 500,000 USD. This was back in 2005. It's probably even more now.
Yeah, it's probably conservative.
Yeah, you know, it's probably close to like 800K or even more these days. You know, so like there needs to be an understanding of like what it means to raise a kid and be responsible for a human being, and I think that needs to be hammered home a whole lot more. Just like, hey, when you like, if you do have a kid, if you know like these are the responsibilities, and I guess what I'm trying to say is just the understanding the consequences and everything that has sex, just like procreation aside, like it's a very complex thing for two people to do together. It
is a very complex thing.
Yeah.
And
like I'm not gonna like, I've made the decision when I was 27 and onwards, obviously not in my earlier 20s, to like I'm never ever gonna have sex with someone that I wouldn't consider raising a family with. You know, so I've been very, very selective with who I've had sex with since I was 27. You know, and I don't expect everyone to subscribe to that belief, but I think that's something that should be considered, at least, you know, as with us as a culture.
Well, and my concern on the current situation, the current situation with what's going on here in Florida, with what's going on in Texas, with what's going on in Mississippi, Oklahoma, and in DC, is that they're not only limiting all access to any kind of sexual discussion, any kind of sexual education.
Yeah, I'm not okay with that.
And I am definitely not okay with that. I think that a lot of the abortion issue would probably sort itself out with better sex education.
Yes.
As you said, you know, you had good sex education. I did not in my day. You know, we had one day, and your parents had to sign, and it wasn't even a whole day, and your parents had to sign a permission form for you to be able to go into the class, and the boys and the girls were separated, and the girls were taught what girls' bodies were going to go through, and I'm assuming boys were taught something similar. I don't really know what happened in the boys' side, but that was the extent of it. And you know, we go back to the issue that you and I have discussed a number of times, is that we have too many parents that don't parent. And so children are not getting the education that they need. So when we start limiting their choices that come as a result of decisions that were poorly made, we just exacerbate the problem. And I don't think either of us wants to live in a welfare state where we are supporting hordes of children that are conceived and kept when they shouldn't be. You know, if we're not going to educate people, then we can't expect them to just know. And if we start trying to impose our moralities on them, then we're no different than the Taliban or anybody else. You know, we love as a country to talk about our Christian beliefs, But if we somehow elected a charismatic Muslim or a charismatic Wiccan or a charismatic Jew that came into office and started converting the members of our Senate and House, how would we feel as a country if suddenly that morality was forced on all of us? We wouldn't be very happy with that. But that's what we're doing to the hundreds of thousands of Muslims, Jews, pagans, non-religious people. We're imposing a Christian morality on them, which is not what this whole thing is supposed to be about.
I mean, Christianity aside, abortion isn't a Christian issue though, because there's a lot of other cultures around the world that are not Christian, that are actually Buddhist, who don't believe in abortions either. Like in Southeast Asia, which is predominantly Buddhist and Muslim, like if abortions are not a thing. If you get caught doing an abortion, you get thrown in jail for murder. So it's not like I would say it's definitely not a Christian thing at all.
Not worldwide, but in this country, I think it is.
Okay.
I think that definitely not worldwide, but in this country, that's the argument that I keep hearing from people is the Christian morality. And you know, my mother and I had a discussion recently about, you know, she's farther afield even than I am on some of these issues. And she was talking about how we swear our presidents in with their hand on a Bible. But my argument there with her was that I'm okay with that because every person that we have elected to that position, every person that we have asked to take that oath, that's their book. So I don't have a problem with them swearing on their book.
Even Mitt Romney would have sworn on that book as a
Right.
Mormon.
Well, I mean, because Mormons believe in the Bible, you know. It's not, just because they're Mormon does not mean that they're not Christian. The name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a Christian church that believes in the Bible. They have additional books, but they still believe in the Bible. That's still their book. So I don't have an issue with that in that situation because that book is appropriate to those people. If we elected a Muslim or I'm sure we've had, or Buddhist or a Hindu or something, and they wanted no book or they wanted their book, I would have no issue with using whatever book they wanted to use, or no book at all if they were a book-free religion. I get very concerned when we start imposing moralities on lawmaking, and that's where the whole Roe v. Wade thing really, on top of the fact that it's my body, it's my choice. And that doesn't mean that there's no consequences for that choice. You know, a lot of people have taken the my body, my choice thing and applied that to vaccinations. And I am 100% your body, your choice. If you don't want a vaccination, fine. There are consequences for that. And if you make that choice, you have to deal with those consequences. And the same thing with the abortion issue. It's my body, my choice. There are consequences for making that choice. There's social stigma. There is just the knowledge that you've done it. There's the emotional, there's the physical. There are consequences for making that choice. You're not making a consequence-free choice, but it's still your choice. And I don't see how we take that away from a person if we're going to guarantee life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Your perspective on people who do late-term abortions? Third trimester? Where there's a whole brain, spine, heartbeat, and everything?
My personal opinion, I'm not for third trimester abortions. I I don't believe that's the right thing to do. Because again, that fetus is probably viable outside the womb. I don't know whether I want the government limiting access to that. I would certainly not make that decision for myself. I don't know if I really don't know if I would want my government limiting access to that for people who have the issue, because once you put any restriction on something, then everything becomes murky at that point. And I don't think that any of us, if we discovered that child in the third trimester was going to be born without a brain, or born with awful
so say they there's an arrhythmia with the heart, and they detected that early on in the third trimester, what should be done?
I don't know. That's the parent's decision based on, and the doctor's decision. I don't know, because the parents and the doctors have to be the person to make that decision. There you definitely get into a great deal of morality and what you personally believe. Is it better to carry that child to term knowing that its life is going to be short, if at all? Is it better to put the mother through what she's gonna have to go through to make that happen? Does the child, should they do that and have the child born? Or is it better not to do that, to go ahead and abort the fetus at that point? I don't know. I thank heavens that I never had to make that decision. But that would have been my decision if that had come. Babies are born that have no possibility of life. I mean, there are fortunately low numbers in today's world of babies that are born that die within days or minutes.
Yes, it's an infant death syndrome or something.
Well, even without that, SIDS is a whole different situation. That those are healthy, perfectly healthy children that for some reason die. And I don't think most people would not, most parents that had baby and lost babies to SIDS would never have considered aborting them, towards the end. Children born with spina bifida, with, multiple
physical
mutations or maladies, some of those parents might have, had they known in advance, and might have made a different decision, even late in the process, because these children are born into a life, however short, of pain and suffering and those kind of things. There are famously children that are born with a brain stem and nothing else. Why? For me, I would say that, but I can't speak for what you would say. And that's the whole point of where I stand on this, is that I can't speak for you. I can't make that decision for you. I don't know what you believe, what your morality is, what your life situation is. So I can't make those decisions. And God knows I don't want some 80-year-old man in Washington deciding what a 23-year-old woman in Oregon is going to do with her body. That's ridiculous.
So do you view abortion as a constitutionally protected right?
I do. I believe that what a woman does with her body is her constitutionally protected right.
Under which part of the Constitution?
14th Amendment, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Which is what Roe was based on.
Yeah. That and the Quartering Act of Privacy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is multiple incidences of precedents that stand up to all this. What has me most concerned with the current situation and what's going on in our world right now is that it has become a political issue. And not only is it a political issue, but it is a political issue straight down party lines. Every judge that has signed on to the draft so far, that's listed on the draft, was nominated by a Republican president. Every judge that did not, that dissented, was nominated by a Democratic president.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. I do not think that it's possible that there's not politics playing into that. And I don't want to see that in my Supreme Court. Historically, the Supreme Court has made weird, you've always had weird things where people who were nominated by Republicans went very liberal and people who were nominated by Democrats went very conservative in their opinions. This one is going straight down party lines. We just had the vote in the Congress to try to give us back some of those protections. That went straight down party lines, with the exception of Joe Manchin that went the other way. Our country is not set up that way. Our country is not evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. And so what's happening is that our republic is not working because our representatives are not representing us. They're representing their party, which is not what it's supposed to be all about. And that's what terrifies me more than anything else right now, is that we're not working as a republic. And I'd hate to see this grand experiment fail. As unfortunately republics have in the past. I don't want our own version of Nero standing outside the Washington Monument.
We've got at least a good another 4 or 5 generations before everything goes kaput.
Let's hope. But I don't want to see that, because that's another thing that worries me right now, is that we're playing politics with people's lives. And the majority, and polls of course are somewhat subjective, but there are numerous polls that show that the majority of the people in this country want at least moderate access to abortion and to a woman's right to choose what she does with her body. Every single survey and poll that I've seen has those numbers somewhere in the 60 percentile for pro-choice, up to a point at least. Maybe not complete access, and we could throw that back to the states if they wanted to, and that's fine. But the problem with doing it in this state by state is that then you've just got people crossing state lines, trying to figure out how to cross state lines to go get things done. They're already, part of their counseling in Texas is making sure that women understand that they can go to other states to get this procedure if they don't make the decision right now.
Do you think here in Florida that we'll vote on the decision not based on political lines, and we can reach a decision through bipartisanship?
No, I don't. With this crazy parental rights bill, which most of that bill it makes sense. It's just a couple of lines in that bill that were thrown in that make the bill so contentious, and have brought in the whole "don't say gay" thing. it's proved, and the way that it was voted on, again, right down party lines. I'm not pleased with what's happening. I don't think that it should be that way. I don't think we should be. It makes everybody a zealot, I guess, and zealotry is never a good thing. But everybody. Too many people today think, well, if you don't like this person, then you're against all of this other stuff. And that's not the way people operate. That's not the way human beings are.
Every single human being is going to have agreements with every single human being and disagreements with every single human being. That's just, there's 7 billion ways to interpret a blank piece of paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that just doesn't work. And I don't want to see us become this divided nation right down these silly party lines.
So if the overturning of Roe v. Wade if it successfully goes through, which it looks like it will, and the right gets turned back down to the state, local level, if the states, especially, so let's take Florida. So if Florida could vote on this in a bipartisan way, would you be okay with that? Say like there's no polarization.
Yeah, if the quote unquote will of the people was truly being followed, then I would be okay with that from a 60,000 foot view. Down at ground level, I would have to make decisions for myself then if this is the society I want to live in. But that's what this whole experiment called America is supposed to be about. That, the word democracy, the etymology of that word is the power of the people. In Greek, that's where it all breaks down into the power of the people. So if that's what the people want, then that should be the law of the land. And then each individual person, if they do not agree with that, then they just need to leave that land. And I hope that I don't get to a point where I have to make that decision, but I would be okay with that, with having to make that decision if I felt that the true will of the people was what was happening. I think that what we've got is a vocal minority that is out there screaming and making a lot of noise, and the majority is too built up in our lives to deal with it. And that's a sad thing. And I don't know how to fix that. If I did, I'd probably be in DC somewhere.
Well, I guess that knocks my next question out, because my next question was going to be, what do we do to fix this?
Yeah, I don't know how to fix it.
I mean, look at us right now. We're two people with differing opinions, and we're having a peaceable conversation. Why can't this happen at a governmental level, local or federal?
Because we're able to have this conversation because we're two pretty normal, relatively rational people. And because we are, we're not going to get involved in the politics game, because that's a horrible game. That's a bad job. I don't want that job.
That reminds me of a quote I see where, like, the smartest people know to stay away from politics, and that's the reason for a lot of the problems we have.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It's true. I mean, anything that in today's world, and it's different, again, while I'm a big student of history and love to go back and look at history, today's politics is new ground. We've never had to, the people who are involved in politics today, none of their predecessors have had to go through what they're going through. They are under a microscope 24/7. They do not have time off. They do not have a break. They don't have the opportunity to have a discussion with somebody of an opposing view and change their mind. Because if they do, that whole discussion has been recorded, is out there on YouTube, is on CNN, is on Fox News, is on MSNBC, and suddenly that politician is a flip-flopper, and then nobody wants to vote for them, and then they don't get to keep their jobs. So the opportunity for making changes and having rational discussions and seeing the other side of an argument, the politicians today don't get a whole lot of those opportunities because everything's being done under a microscope. I know I personally don't want to live that way. So I would not want to be, a Nancy Pelosi or a Mitch McConnell or,
Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, any of those people.
Yeah.
I don't want to be there because I don't want that kind of scrutiny on my life because I make mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes.
I come up with ideas and I change my mind. I talk to other people and I change my mind. And they're not allowed to do that.
Which is horrifying.
It is, but it's true. I mean, John McCain was vilified for changing his mind on the issue that we're discussing today.
Yeah.
I find it shocking and horrifying on the issue that we're discussing today that the way that two of our Supreme Court justices danced around the Roe v. Wade issue during their Senate confirmation. They were straight up asked what they thought of Roe v. Wade. Now, Amy Coney Barrett, I got to give her some credit. We all knew where she stood from minute one. And she never, we knew from minute one that she was going to support overturning Roe v. Wade, and there was never any question about that. But Gorsuch and Kavanaugh both said that they felt that Roe v. Wade, and surprisingly, what was the name of it? I want to say it's Kilgore. I think it's Kilgore, which guarantees the right for married people to have access to birth control, because that was also before the Supreme Court in the 60s. And they were asked on both of those questions, and on both of those cases, they said straight up in Senate that they felt that they were precedent and that they would uphold precedent. Now, in both cases, they didn't actually say, AOC is taking things a little bit far. Neither one of them actually said that they wouldn't overturn.
AOC took things far? No way.
I know, yeah. They didn't actually say that they wouldn't overturn. But they certainly gave that impression to everyone in the room and to the people that were watching the confirmations, at home.
I don't think anybody familiar with anything that is not Gorsuch, but that Kavanaugh, anyone familiar with anything that Kavanaugh has done in his history should have known, hey, this is a guy who's very against Roe v. Wade, that he's made a huge career out of that.
I had hoped, and this is one of my failings when it comes to politics in the world today, I think, is that I always hope that my leaders will be better people than I am. I would like to hold the people that we are going to put in positions of leadership to a higher standard than John Q. Public. And I would like to think that we put people in those kind of situations where we give them the authority to make decisions for us. I would like to think that they are better than we are. The past few years have certainly shown me that that is not the case. And that gives me serious concern for our society and the way that we run our society. Because if I know my failings, and if people are making decisions for me, if I'm electing people and sending them off to make decisions for me, I don't want them to have the same faults and failings that I have. I want them to do that overcoming my faults and failings. And I know that that's a big ask.
I mean, I would say that that's actually impossible, because because no human is perfect.
No human is perfect, but I think some of our previous leaders held themselves to a higher standard, I guess would be the way that at least it appeared.
I was going to say, did they hold themselves to a higher standard, or did it appear? Because we have the whole Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe thing going on.
Yes.
And that was our freaking president.
Well, I mean, we've got Bill Clinton and that whole side things. I mean, we go right back to our original conversation that people have sex.
Wait, they do?
Yes, people have sex. Yes.
My mom told me they came from a stork.
No, people have. Babies come from a stork, but people still have sex.
Oh, okay.
People have sex. They do. They've done it for, Alexander the Great had sex. Mm-hmm. Who he had sex with is a whole nother issue, but,
Genghis Khan fathered a whole 10% of the world's population.
Well, and so did Charlemagne, larger than that, but that's just a math problem, and it's a very complicated math problem. Yeah. People that look like you are descended from Genghis Khan. People who look like me are descended from Charlemagne. That's
Short
just...
people?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
sorry.
And that's just a question of numbers, and that's a big, huge math problem. Mm-hmm. But sex doesn't mean that people are going to have sex, and sex does not mean that you're not still taking the issues that you are responsible for seriously and holding yourself to a higher accountability on the issues that you are responsible for. Mm-hmm. John F. Kennedy was not responsible for the sexuality of America.
No.
Bill Clinton was not responsible for the sexuality of America. Even Donald Trump was not responsible for the sexuality of America. Mm-hmm. They were responsible for a lot of decisions about how the country was run, and they were responsible for upholding the Constitution of the United States. That they were responsible for. And I would hope that they would hold themselves to a higher standard on that issue than I might personally in my own life. I'm not taking on the responsibility. I'm not taking on the rights, and I'm not getting the benefits that they get. So I don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But they're getting a lot of benefit and for taking on that responsibility.
And a lot of liabilities too.
Yes, but there's again, they're able to make the decision. Oh. They're able to make the choice to take on those liabilities, to take on that responsibility, to get the benefits that they get. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the type of person that in today's world is willing to do that is a more narcissistic type of personality whose basic personality traits don't allow them to sit down and have an open discourse the way you and I can on important issues, and to accept that what I think and what I believe and what has been ingrained in me because of my personal experience may not be the only way to look at an issue. And that's what's important, and that's what we need. We need people who are able, we need our leaders to be able to see that a staunchly white girl raised in uber conservative Riverview, Florida, has a different life experience and life perspective than an Asian man from New York City. You know, we had very, very different lives. Our life experience is very, very different. We have come together to see eye to eye on a lot of experiences, but a lot of how we got there from very different paths. And that does create some different situations that our leaders need to be able to understand, and our leaders need to be able to have open discourse to be able to understand those things. And I don't think that they do.
Yeah.
See, I actually remember the commercial with the Indian and the tear. So,
Right. So how do you feel about those people who equate abortions? They equate people who are pro-choice, who are pro-abortion, as slave owners. I don't know if you're familiar with that perspective.
no, I'm not.
So I'm not even sure how I feel about this perspective, but one thing I did uncover is that a lot of people, they say that the reason that people are pro-choice is because they don't value the human fetus as a living being, the same way that slave owners didn't value slaves as human beings, or 3/5 of a human being. And that's one thing that they say.
Well, my first I'm going to avoid saying shame on you, Rex. That's kind of shock journalism. Because I think that's got to be a relatively small number of people that are making that particular connection, because it's not out there in common knowledge that everybody knows that particular connection. Secondly, I don't think that that's such a fallacious argument and such a ridiculous argument, in that we go back to where we started this conversation, you and I, with when is that a person? And I don't think anybody could argue that the slave that was in the field doing or standing on an auction block being bought and sold, that person was a person. That was a viable, living person, capable of thought, capable of function, capable of surviving on his or her own. A zygote that has done nothing more than had a single cell split into two is not the same creature as that person standing on that stump.
But if you give it a few weeks, it will start to resemble one.
In a few weeks, it will start to resemble one. However, I can look out there right now and see a cloud and probably find a goat somewhere. It doesn't mean that cloud is a goat. It just resembles a goat. Now, the difference is that cloud will never become a goat. That zygote will eventually become a fetus, which will eventually become a child. And I do recognize that there is a progression that will happen there, that's going to happen if left unimpeded. That is the natural progression. But you can't, there's no argument that would say that a zygote and a person, a slave, are the same. It's not. Not medically, not scientifically, not in any way. You know, the in Texas, their law is going by heartbeat. I would argue that even that's not, you know, we do that in test tubes every day.
Test for heartbeats?
No, we create things that can have heartbeats. They do that in genetic research all the time. Doesn't make those things people. It's research. We kill monkeys, we kill rats, we kill earthworms, earthworms I don't think have heartbeats, but we kill monkeys, we kill rats, we kill dogs and cats in research all the time. They all have heartbeats. So how is that different?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about that as well.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
But again, we're imposing our thoughts, our moralities on those things, and I don't think those belong.
So how do you? So as policymakers, then how do you decide the culture for people? Because that's essentially what this whole thing is. That's because the job of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution and decide what is and what isn't protected under constitutional rights, which essentially is just deciding the culture of a nation. So how does someone do that without dipping into their morals then?
Well,
because culture, there is definitely a parallel between cultures and constitutions of any country of the world.
Right. In my opinion, our Supreme Court justices have to be more black and white. And I'm not saying that in a racial way.
That didn't even occur to me.
But they have to. Their job is to interpret the Constitution and to interpret the constitutionality of things. The Constitution is pretty cut and dried. There's not a whole lot of morality built into the Constitution. There is not really culture built into not supposed to be culture in the Constitution. And that's what you're saying that the Supreme Court should be adjudicating, and I say that they shouldn't.
Well, I'm not saying that they should be. I'm just saying that's just a consequence of their job. Because we make our decisions based on what we are allowed and not allowed to do based on the system that exists. And the very fabric of the system of the United States is founded upon the Constitution.
Yes. But the Constitution says that all Americans have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the question is, and I think the question needs to be, and it needs to be from a physical scientific viewpoint, is when does that start?
And I think that's where the disconnect happens.
Right. And that's what needs to be decided, and I don't know that the Supreme Court is the person to decide that.
So it should be a local issue?
Possibly. I don't think it should be a local issue, in my personal opinion. I don't think it should be a local issue. I think it should be a systemic thing. And I think that it probably needs to be decided by some sort of referendum. The problem is I don't know how to get everyone involved, short of putting it on American Idol.
That seems to be our best voting system. That has been the most prolific nationwide voting system ever created.
Yeah.
There's no voter fraud there.
Yeah, it's really kind of sad, but yes, whether it be something that's done like a census type of deal, where we actually have people going out and going door to door, I don't know what the correct answer, what is logistically possible. I do know that we don't get nearly the percentage of people coming out to vote under most circumstances. Now, we did get a pretty good percentage in this last presidential election because it was so contentious.
I was going to say crazy, but contentious works.
But we don't typically get, again, we're getting the vocal minority. Mm-hmm. And that's what concerns me, is that we're not getting the majority of people out saying their opinions.
Do you think we could get more people to have these type of conversations?
What you and I have, and I know I've actually had training, I believe you probably have too, but you and I are very skilled at critical thinking.
Thank you.
And and we don't teach that to our children. And that is what's required in order to have these kind of open discourses where things are actually resolved. I think a lot of people can sit down and have this conversation and then turn around and go downstairs to the bar and talk about what an idiot Rex is, and never change, never make any movement, never have any substantial concert that comes from those discussions. You have to have critical thinking skills to be able to accept that perhaps your viewpoint is not the only viewpoint, and to be able to come to some kind of a resolution of a problem at the end of a conversation. I don't think that today I'm going to be leaving here thinking that life starts at conception, and I don't think that you're going to be leaving here thinking that life starts at birth. Mm-hmm. But I do think that if we spend enough time together, we might find some point where we could come to a middle ground where we said, okay, we could both agree on this, and we can live with whatever that is as being what we're going to decide is what we want for our culture and our society. And I do think there is a number there somewhere.
I mean, I used to be very pro-choice. I used to be very on that side as well. And my perspective changed when someone very close, very dear to me had a miscarriage in her very first month. And at first we were like, it's just, we just had a miscarriage and wasn't going to be a baby anyway. But then, even though it was still in the first month, the baby actually died. Well, miscarriage. And they still had to inject her stomach with a needle to kill what was left, because even though the baby died, there were still parts of it that were still trying to grow. And they had to kill the rest of what was trying to grow. Right. And then when she had to it had to exit her vagina, and she said that when she saw like what came out, even though it was still microscopic, like there was still like a huge amount of fluids that came out, and she's like, all of that was in me, and that was feeding something, and that something was actually growing. Mm-hmm. It was receiving nutrition. She said her life completely changed, and again, this person is extremely, extremely dear to me, and just being part of that and seeing her just go through this huge emotional turmoil, because she didn't make the choice to terminate the baby.
Right.
Just
it happened.
The universe chose to do it.
Yes.
And at first she was like, I don't care, but then and then she saw that, she was like, whoa.
And that's the
when
reason
it shifted inside me.
And that's the reason that I'm pro-choice. Mm-hmm. That exact same reason. Because what a woman goes through when she is pregnant. If that same friend of yours had a tumor on her intestine that was growing and was cancerous, and they removed that tumor, and she was awake and saw them removing that tumor, there would be fluids, there would be something growing. They would have to worry about getting all of the tumor so that it did not continue to grow inside her. It's the exact same thing.
I would.
But we as women are biologically driven to protect the fetus that is inside us. And so we create an emotional bond with that fetus that's a biological thing. We don't have a choice with that. There's a certain amount of bonding that happens early on. And so she can see what is, and I don't want to minimize, I'm not minimizing her experience. Please do not think this. Because I've sat with a friend through a miscarriage, and it's horrible.
It's horrifying.
It's awful, and it's horrifying, and it's terrible. And when it is a child that you desperately want, it is heartbreaking, and I don't mean to minimize that. But if we are looking at this from a systemic, high-level policy-making standpoint, then, and from a scientific perspective, what came out of her were a lot of fluids and a lot of blood and a lot of stuff that, if it came out under any other circumstance, you would just call it gross. And yes, it was growing, but again, a tumor grows, a cancer grows. That doesn't make it anything else. It's symbiotic with the mother at that point. And that's the reason that I am pro-choice, because I understand that a woman goes through horrible things when she's pregnant. Emotionally, hormonally, physically. It's bizarre. And me telling somebody else that they have to go through that's not my choice. That's not my choice.
I think you and I agree on a lot more than we disagree upon.
I think we do. We usually do.
All right, so cameras will be dying in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Is there any closing statements you would like to make?
The closing statement that I would want to make is just that I would like people to truly think about this subject, decide what you're willing to dictate to somebody else and why you're willing to dictate that to somebody else. And then go out and do something about it. Go out and make your voice known. Go out and support the candidates that we're sending out. Find out who you're sending to represent you in Washington, in Tallahassee, in whatever state you might be in. Find out who you're sending and who they really are, and are they representing you and what you believe in? Because if they're not, then we're going to wind up in situations that you're going to be, you can find yourself in situations that you're unhappy with, and that there's nothing you can do to change because you have been misrepresented. Choices that we make with our bodies are our choices, and nobody needs to be making those decisions. Certainly not people that you wouldn't have to your house for dinner. And I think all of us, talk all the time about, I hate this person or I hate that person in Washington, but they're representing you. They're making decisions for your life. And if you don't like them, change them. Go out and find somebody that you do like, find somebody that you do believe in, and make it change. That's the only way we can have a representative culture and a representative government, is if we choose the people that represent us. It doesn't matter if you're a donkey or an elephant. It doesn't make any difference. I've been both several times throughout my life. I was a Reagan Republican. But you have to figure out what you believe in and vote that way. And for God's sakes, vote.
Yes. Thank you very much. This was enjoyable.
It was.
Cool. Oh, no, 100%. Thank you for doing this again. Thank you.
All right.
And that's it.
Cool.
All right. God damn it, Robin. This is supposed to be divisive.
But we couldn't. I mean...